His hands started shaking. Not a tremor, a full, visible rattle, the kind that travels up the wrists and into the shoulders, the kind a body produces when it has been caught in a lie it spent 15 years polishing into truth. Uncle Mike held that handmade card like it had burned him, and the room went quiet the way rooms only go quiet when everyone suddenly understands that what they just witnessed was not a child's sweet gesture, but something else entirely. 40 people standing around a backyard in paper party hats, and every single one of them looking at a 60-year-old man fall apart over a birthday card drawn in crayon. I was standing near the back, next to the folding table with the sheet cake on it, and I did not move. I did not say a word. I just smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. Before I go back to where this all started, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And if you want these stories early and completely uncut, channel members are already ahead of you. They heard this one before anyone else, and they're already on the next one. The join button is right next to the subscribe button below the video. Now let's go back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. The backyard still smelled like sunscreen and grilled sausage. Someone had strung yellow lights along the fence, and a playlist of old songs from the 80s was looping through a Bluetooth speaker near the patio door. 40 people with plastic cups, the kind of afternoon that is supposed to feel like family. I had been standing in that yard for 2 hours, smiling at cousins I see twice a year, refilling my son Tommy's cup with lemonade, watching my uncle hold court near the grill the way he always does, wide gestures, loud laugh. The undisputed center of every room he walks into. I had been planning this afternoon for a long time. Not the party. The moment inside it. To understand what happened that day, you need to know what came before it, all of it, starting from the beginning, because the card was never really about the card. My name is Renata Osei. I am 38 years old. My father, David Osei, died 2 years ago from a cardiac event, fast, no warning, the kind of loss that leaves you standing in a hospital hallway at 11 o'clock at night wondering how a Tuesday can just end like that. My father was a careful man. A contractor, self-employed for over 30 years, meticulous about paperwork the way people become when they have built everything they own with their own hands and have no safety net underneath them. He kept records of everything. Invoices, receipts, loan documents, everything in a steel lockbox under his bed, organized by year, going back to 1991. Michael Osei, Uncle Mike, is my father's younger brother. They are connected by blood, by a shared last name, by a childhood in the same house in Accra, and by $35,000 that changed hands 15 years ago. Documented in a signed loan agreement my father drafted himself on a Tuesday morning in his kitchen. Mike is not my father by blood, he is my uncle, my father's sibling, and he has no legal or familial relationship to my son Tommy beyond being Tommy's great-uncle. That distinction matters. I want you to understand the cast of characters clearly before we go any further. Tommy is my son. He is 10 years old. His father, my ex-husband, Jerome Achebe, is not part of this story. Tommy lives with me. It has been the two of us in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city for 4 years now, and we are steady, and we are fine, and Tommy is the most grounded child I have ever met. The Osei family dynamic is not complicated to describe. There is a hierarchy, and Uncle Mike sits at the top of it. He has sat there since before I was born, since he was the brother who made it, who moved to the city first, who wore the good suits to Christmas and let everyone know, without ever quite saying it, that his financial success entitled him to a kind of moral authority over the rest of the family. My father, the older brother, the harder worker, the quieter man, was always positioned just one rung below him. Not because my father was lesser. Because Mike needed someone to be lesser, and my father was too gracious to argue about it. After my father died, that dynamic transferred cleanly onto me. I was the daughter. I was the single mother. I was the one who had left a stable job to try freelance accounting work, which Mike referred to, at least twice at family gatherings, as Renata's little experiment. I became the person the family worried about, checked in on with a particular tone, and offered advice to unsolicited, consistent, and entirely wrong about my actual circumstances. I let them. That was a choice. A strategic one. The first time I understood the full shape of what was happening was about 8 months after my father's funeral. I was at my Aunt Celestine's house. She is Mike's wife, connected to me through marriage, no blood tie, for a Sunday dinner, and Mike pulled me aside near the hallway to tell me that if I ever needed help with the apartment, I should ask him directly. His voice had that particular texture of generosity that is really a form of ownership. I don't want you struggling, and too proud to say so. I smiled and told him I appreciated it. That afternoon, I got home and opened my laptop and reviewed the $35,000 loan document I had found in my father's lockbox 3 weeks after the funeral. Signed by Michael Osei. Witnessed. Dated. 15 years old and never repaid. I made a digital copy and saved it in 4 places. The second incident was at Christmas, 18 months later. Mike was describing my father's estate to the extended family, casually, over dinner, the way he does, and he said, loudly enough for the whole table, that David had been generous to a fault, always giving money away without expecting anything back. He looked at me when he said it. It was not subtle. He was not describing my father. He was laying groundwork. Reshaping a loan into a gift, one family dinner at a time. I set my fork down very slowly. I said nothing, but I noted the date in my phone under a folder I had titled simply, Documentation. The third incident was the one that made me stop waiting and start planning. 6 months ago, Tommy came home from a Sunday visit to Mike and Celestine's house. They had started inviting him separately, which I had allowed because Tommy loves his cousins, and Tommy sat at the kitchen table and said, in the careful way 10-year-olds relay adult conversations they have half understood, Uncle Mike said Grandpa David used to give him money all the time because they were close. He paused. Is that true, Mom? I looked at my son across the kitchen table. I kept my voice level. I said, your grandfather was very generous. And very careful about paperwork. Tommy nodded and went back to his homework. I sat there for another moment and made a decision. Mike's daughter Priya, his youngest, who works as a civil engineer and has always been the family member I trust most, had called me 3 weeks before the party to tell me, apologetically, that Mike had recently told the extended family that the $35,000 had always been a gift between brothers. He had said it at Aunt Celestine's birthday brunch. He had said it in front of 7 people. She said she felt I should know. Her voice went quiet before she hung up. I'm sorry, Renata. He's rewriting it. Priya, I said, he's been doing that for 2 years. I've been letting him. She didn't answer right away. Then, what are you going to do? I told her I had already done it. She didn't know what I meant. Not yet. Nobody did except Tommy, who I had sat down with 2 weeks earlier and had a careful, honest conversation with, the way you talk to a 10-year-old about something that happened before he was born. I explained that his grandfather had lent Uncle Mike some money a long time ago. I explained that it was important that people tell the truth about things like that. I showed him the document, briefly, in the way you show a child evidence without burdening them with weight. And I asked him if he wanted to do something kind for Uncle Mike's birthday. Something that would help everyone remember the truth. Tommy looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Can I draw the card myself?" I said yes. The party was 3 weeks away. Mike had been rewriting history in public for 2 years, and every retelling made the loan a little softer, a little more charitable, a little more like something my father had simply given freely. He was 60 years old and respected, and nobody in that family was going to contradict him, except a piece of paper my father had signed 15 years ago. Delivered in a crayon envelope by a child who had no idea how many rooms his grandfather's careful handwriting was about to walk back into. I didn't know, standing in that backyard watching Mike tear open the envelope, exactly how many people would take out their phones. I didn't know that Priya's husband, a family law attorney named Bernard Akampong, would be standing 4 feet to Mike's left when the color drained out of my uncle's face. I didn't know that 3 of the people at that party had heard the gift between brothers story personally and were now doing the arithmetic in real time. What I did know was that the document inside that card was notarized. It was dated. It had a repayment schedule that had never been honored. And it had my father's signature at the bottom, in the same careful block letters he used to label every folder in that steel lockbox under his bed. That's when I understood I had exactly one conversation left to have, and Mike was about to start it for me. Bernard Acampong had been my father's attorney first. He had drafted the original loan document, had sat at my father's kitchen table 15 years ago with a legal pad and a cup of tea, and walked two brothers through the terms while my father's old radio played in the background. When my father died and I found the lockbox, Bernard's name was on the witnessing line. I called him the same week. By the end of that first conversation, he had agreed to represent me in whatever came next, and we had both agreed that whatever came next would happen on my timeline, not Mike's. I kept Bernard out of every family conversation for 2 years. The reasoning was simple and specific. Mike was still the executor of a small jointly held property my father had co-owned with him, a parcel of land outside the city, modest, but real, and if Mike knew I had legal counsel, he would move on that property before I had the documentation fully in order. Bernard had said it plainly in our second meeting. His hands folded on his desk, his reading glasses pushed up on his head. Let him talk. Talking is not a legal act. Let him say gift at every dinner table in the city. Paper beats words every time, and you have the paper. So I let Mike talk. For 2 years, I let him talk. The first close call was at Aunt Celestine's house, about 14 months before the birthday party. It was one of those Sunday dinners where Mike holds the floor and everyone passes dishes around, and the conversation eventually finds its way to money the way it always does in families where money has always been scarce enough to matter. Mike was talking about the land parcel, casually, the way he discusses things he considers already settled, and his son, Kwame, who is 26 and works in commercial real estate and has always been the sharpest observer in the room, looked across the table at me. "Renata," he said, setting down his fork, "aren't you listed on that title somewhere?" Dad mentioned something once. The table did not go quiet, but I felt it shift, the way a room shifts when a question lands with more weight than the person who asked it intended. "Your father would know better than I would," I said. Technically true. Bernard had already confirmed my position on that title. I was not listed. But Mike didn't know I knew that, and the phrasing gave Kwame nowhere comfortable to push. Mike, across the table, picked up his water glass. "David kept everything in his head," he said. Half the time he didn't even write things down. He looked at me when he said it, the same look as the Christmas table, the same light laying of groundwork. I smiled and asked Celestine to pass the rice. That night, at 11:15, I forwarded the title documentation Bernard had pulled from county records to my own encrypted email archive and added a new folder, Land Parcel, Timeline. Then I sent Bernard a short message, "Kwame is paying attention." He replied within 10 minutes, "Good. Means the family is starting to ask questions. That works in our favor." The near miss had been this. I had been carrying a copy of the original loan document in the inner pocket of my bag for 6 weeks at that point, a habit Bernard had not advised and I had not told him about. If Kwame had pressed, if I had felt the room shift further, I might have placed it on that table 14 months early and lost the timing entirely. After I got home that night, I took the document out of my bag and put it back in the lockbox. I left it there until the week of the party. The second close call happened 3 months later, at the school pickup line of all places. Celestine had offered to collect Tommy on Tuesdays when my afternoon client calls ran long, and I had accepted because it was genuinely helpful and because declining would have signaled something I wasn't ready to signal yet. One Tuesday she was waiting with me. She had arrived early. I had arrived late, and we were standing on the sidewalk outside Tommy's school when she said, her voice careful and slightly too casual, "Mike mentioned you called Bernard Acampong last year. About your father's estate." I kept my eyes on the school door. I called a lot of people after Dad died. Bernard knew him. It made sense to reach out. I paused just long enough to be natural. "How is Bernard?" "I haven't spoken to him in ages." Celestine studied the side of my face for a moment. She is a perceptive woman, I want to be clear about that, because I do not underestimate her. She has been married to Mike for 31 years, and she has learned to read the gaps in what people say. She looked at me the way she looks at things she is deciding whether to press on. Then Tommy came through the school doors at a run, backpack bouncing, waving at Celestine with the full-body enthusiasm of a child who has been sitting in a classroom for 6 hours, and the moment dissolved. "He's got David's eyes," Celestine said quietly, watching him. "I know," I said. She did not bring up Bernard again. But on the drive home, Tommy told me that Uncle Mike had asked him, twice, whether I ever talked about Grandpa David's money at home. Tommy, who is 10 and observant and deeply loyal, had told him, "Mom doesn't really talk about money stuff." That was the moment I called Bernard and told him I wanted to move the land parcel documentation into formal dispute status within 60 days. Bernard said, "Are you sure you're ready?" I said, "I've been ready. I was just being careful." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, from somewhere across his office, "All right, Renata. Let's get ready to be done being careful." The deadline I had been working toward was straightforward. Bernard had identified a 60-day window following the formal filing of a repayment demand, after which, if Mike did not respond, we could escalate to civil court with the loan document, the witnessing record, and 15 years of zero repayment as our foundation. We had planned to file the initial demand in early autumn, quietly, through certified mail. No family event. No audience. Just legal process doing what legal process does. And then Mike announced his 60th birthday party. When Priya called to tell me about the gift between brothers brunch story, I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing the draft demand letter Bernard had emailed that morning. I read the letter once. Then I set my phone down and looked at the wall for about 45 seconds. Then I called Bernard back. "The party is in 3 weeks," I said. "I heard," he said. He already knew. Priya had told her husband first. "I want to adjust the approach." A pause. "How far?" "Not the legal part. The legal part stays exactly the same. Just the order of events." Bernard was quiet for a moment in the way that meant he was thinking through exposure and not disapproving. "Walk me through it." I walked him through it. The card. The photocopy. Tommy's handwriting in blue crayon. 40 guests. The version of events Mike had been building for 2 years, dismantled in front of every person he had told it to. Bernard said, "The document in the card has no legal force on its own." "I know," I said. "It's not for legal force. It's for the record." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Your father would have been very methodical about this." "Yes," I said. "He would have." In the 2 weeks before the party, I did 4 things. I sat down with Tommy and had the conversation I described: careful, honest, age-appropriate, and let him decide whether he wanted to be part of it. He did. He spent an evening at the kitchen table with his colored pencils, his tongue pressed between his teeth in concentration, drawing a birthday card with a yellow sun on the front and a small dog in the corner that does not look especially like a dog. He wrote the message himself. I spelled the words he asked about. I made the photocopy of the loan document, reduced slightly, legible, 1 page, and folded it inside the card myself. Then I sealed it with a sticker of a rocket ship that Tommy chose. I called Priya and told her, without the details, that the party was going to be more eventful than planned and that she might want to make sure Bernard was positioned somewhere he could see Mike's face when he opened the card. Priya, who had clearly been doing her own quiet accounting for some time, said only, "Understood." She did not ask me to stop. She did not warn me off. She said understood, and she meant it. I laid out Tommy's outfit for the party: navy blue shirt, the good sneakers, and I told him that whatever happened, he had done something kind and honest and his grandfather would have been proud of him. Tommy thought about this. Then he said, "Will Uncle Mike be mad?" "Probably," I said. "At me?" "No," I said. "Not at you." He seemed to accept this. He went back to his book. The night before the party, I sat at my kitchen table with the original loan document in front of me, the one from the lockbox, the one with my father's block letter signature, and I looked at it for a long time. My father was a man who believed that paperwork was a form of respect. That writing something down was how you told another person, "I take this seriously. I take you seriously." He lent his brother $35,000, and he wrote every term down by hand, and he had it witnessed because he was not careless with the things he valued, and he valued his brother, and he expected his brother to value him back. Mike had been telling the family for 2 years that it was a gift. He had been saying it at brunch tables and Christmas dinners and birthday parties, saying it in front of cousins and aunts and children, slowly replacing a document with a story until the story was the only thing left. Except that my father kept paper. And he taught me to do the same. I folded the original back into the lockbox. The photocopy was already inside a crayon-drawn envelope with a rocket sticker on the flap, sitting on Tommy's dresser, ready for the morning. The party started at 2 in the afternoon. I arrived at 1:55. I watched Mike work the yard for 90 minutes, the wide gestures, the loud laugh, the absolute ease of a man who has never once considered that the story he has been telling might be about to find its ending. When Celestine called for the card portion of the afternoon, Tommy walked up to his great-uncle with both hands and said, in the direct way of children who have not yet learned to soften things, "I made this for you, Uncle Mike. It's really important." And Mike, smiling, took the envelope from my son's hands. He looked at the rocket sticker. He smiled wider. He said, to the crowd around him, "Look at this, handmade," and people laughed warmly and leaned in, and he peeled back the flap, and he pulled out the card, and he opened it, and I watched the smile stop. I watched his hands find the photocopy folded inside. I watched him understand what it was. I watched the color leave his face in stages, like a light being slowly turned down, and then I watched his hands start to shake, not a tremor but a full, visible rattle, and I was already 2 steps ahead of where he thought I was, and the room had gone very quiet. And I did not move from my spot near the sheet cake table, and Mike had not yet looked at me, but when he did, I was already smiling. He called twice that evening. I let it go to voicemail both times. Everything I needed to say, I would say once, in front of everyone. 3 days after the party, Mike called a family meeting. He did not call it that, of course. He called it a dinner, an informal gathering, a chance for everyone to clear the air, which is what people say when they want an audience for the version of events they have decided is true. Celestine sent the message to the family group chat on a Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, every branch of the Osei family had confirmed attendance except me. I had not been invited. I found out through Priya, who texted me a screenshot with a single line beneath it. "He's planning something. Bernard says be ready." I was already ready. I had been ready since the night before the party. The dinner was set for Saturday at 6 in the evening, at Mike and Celestine's house, the same house where I had stood in the hallway and heard Mike offer to help me with my rent, the same table where he had said my father gave money away without expecting anything back. Kwame would be there, and Priya, and 4 of Mike's oldest friends from the neighborhood, 2 of whom had been at the birthday party and had watched the card happen in real time. Also present, Celestine's sister, Adiz, who had no opinion on anything and announced this loudly at every gathering, which was itself a kind of opinion. Bernard had confirmed he would not attend as counsel, his presence would formalize things prematurely, but that he would be reachable by phone throughout the evening and that I should not sign anything, agree to anything, or accept any informal arrangement without calling him first. I arranged for Tommy to spend Saturday evening at his school friend Marcus's house. I told Tommy I had an adult dinner. He said okay and asked if he could bring his tablet. I said yes. I dressed carefully. Not formally, a dark green wrap dress I have owned for 3 years, low heels, nothing that read as either confrontational or deferential. I drove myself. I arrived 4 minutes early, which I had calculated, and I rang the doorbell, which I had not done in this house in 11 years. Celestine opened the door and looked at me for just a moment longer than she should have before stepping back to let me in. She had not been told I was coming. That registered on her face plainly, a blink, 3 times fast, the way she does before she cries, though she was nowhere near crying yet. "Renata," she said, and her voice was careful. "Celestine." I handed her the bottle of wine I had brought. "Thank you for having me." She took the bottle and turned toward the kitchen, and I walked into the dining room and found 12 people sitting around a table that had been set for 11. Mike was at the head of the table. He saw me the moment I came through the doorway, and I watched him do the thing I had seen him do at the birthday party, not the shaking, Not yet, but the precursor to it, the stillness that came over him when reality arrived somewhere he had not planned for it. His hands, which had been resting on the table, moved to his lap. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Renata. His voice was steady. He was working at it. I didn't know you were joining us. From across the table, one of his old friends, a wide man named Solomon who had been at the birthday party and had watched the whole thing from 6 feet away, glanced between us with the careful neutrality of someone who has already decided this evening is going to be significant. I heard there was a dinner, I said, and pulled out the empty chair at the far end of the table, directly opposite Mike, and sat down. Priya, seated to my left, set her water glass down very slowly. She did not look at me. She looked straight ahead, which was exactly what we had agreed she would do. Celestine came back from the kitchen and stopped in the doorway when she saw me seated. She recovered quickly. She is, as I said, perceptive, and brought a plate from the sideboard and set it in front of me without a word. For 20 minutes, the table performed normalcy. Food was passed. Someone talked about a road construction project that had been disrupting their commute. Adiz said she had no opinion on the construction, but that the noise was excessive. Solomon told a story about a fishing trip. Mike laughed at it, the big laugh, the one that fills a room, but his hands stayed in his lap between bites, and he did not look at the far end of the table more than once every few minutes, which, for Mike, was a form of restraint that cost him something. Then Kwame set down his fork and said, into a gap in the conversation, "Dad, you called this dinner for a reason." The table shifted. Not dramatically, a slight change in posture, a fork set down somewhere else, Adiz suddenly very interested in her water glass. Mike looked at his son, and then he looked at me, and then he looked at the room, and the big social machine of him, the decades of being the person who controlled every room he entered, engaged fully. I called this dinner, Mike said, his voice settling into something measured and reasonable, because I think there's been a misunderstanding in the family. About my brother. About his intentions. He paused. About the nature of our relationship. I did not speak. David was my brother, Mike continued, and his voice had warmth in it that sounded, to anyone who did not know better, entirely genuine. We were close in a way that, it's hard to explain to people who didn't see it. When he gave me that money 15 years ago, there was no paperwork in his mind. The document was a formality. He told me himself. He said, "Mike, this is yours. Pay it back when you can. Don't worry about it." Solomon nodded once, slowly. He had heard some version of this before. Celestine, now seated at the table, looked at her plate. He kept a record, Mike said, because that's how he was wired. But a record doesn't tell you what was in a man's heart. The table was quiet. I waited 3 full seconds. Then I reached into the bag I had set on the floor beside my chair, and I placed a manila folder on the table in front of me. "You're right that a record doesn't tell you what was in a man's heart," I said. My voice was conversational. "But it does tell you what was in his words. And your brother chose his words very carefully." I opened the folder and slid the first document to the center of the table, not toward Mike, just to the center, where anyone could see it. It was a photocopy of the loan agreement. The same document Tommy had placed in the birthday card, but this was the full version. 2 pages, the repayment schedule on the second page, the witnessing signature on the bottom. "This is the original loan agreement," I said. "Witnessed by Bernarda Campong, who is your brother's attorney and is now mine. It specifies the amount, $35,000, the repayment schedule, the interest terms, and the date. 15 years ago this past March." A pause in the room. 2 seconds too long. Mike looked at the document. Something shifted in his expression, too fast to name, but Solomon caught it, because Solomon looked at Mike the way you look at someone when you have just revised your estimate of them. "I know what it says," Mike said. His voice was still controlled. "I'm telling you the context. The context is in the document." I kept my voice even. "My father wrote the context down. That's what the document is." Kwame, to Mike's left, had gone very still. Mike drew a breath. "Renata, your father and I had an understanding that goes beyond what was written. He left a letter." The table went quiet in a different way than before. I reached into the folder and placed the second document on the table. It was a single page, handwritten, in my father's block-letter script. I had found it in the lockbox, folded inside the loan agreement itself, the same day I found everything else. I had been holding it for 2 years. I had not shown it to anyone except Bernard, who had read it once, set it down on his desk, and said nothing for a long moment. He wrote it 8 months before he died, I said. It's addressed to me. He describes the loan in his own words, what it was for, what the terms were, why he kept the documentation, and what he wanted to happen to that money after he was gone. He specifically describes it as a loan. He uses that word 4 times. And he says, in this paragraph here, I did not read it aloud. I slid the page toward the center of the table so the people nearest could see. He says he never told Mike the debt was forgiven. He says he was waiting for the right time. The color started leaving Mike's face. Not all at once, in stages, from the jaw upward, the way I had watched it happen at the birthday party. His hand moved to the water glass in front of him. He set it down, carefully, like he needed to focus on something. Celestine was looking at her husband. Not at the document. At him. That letter, Mike said, and his voice had changed, something in it was working harder than before, could have been written at any time. You could have. It's dated and notarized, I said. Bernard notarized it at my father's request. There's a notary stamp on the bottom of the page. You can look. Solomon leaned forward very slightly in his chair. He was looking at the stamp. Adiz, for the first time all evening, had no opinion to announce. Mike's hand moved to his phone on the table beside his plate. He picked it up. Put it back. Picked it up again. This is a family matter, he said. His voice had gone tight, higher, a fraction of a register above where it had been. This doesn't need to be, we can handle this as a family. We're handling it as a family, I said. This is the family. Priya, to my left, was looking straight ahead. But she had shifted fractionally in her chair, closer to my side of the table, close enough that I felt it. Kwame's eyes moved from the letter to his father. He did not speak. But his expression, which had been carefully neutral since I sat down, had shifted into something I had not seen on his face before. He looked, for just a moment, like his mother. I let the silence sit for 5 full seconds. Then I reached back into the folder. There is one more thing, I said. Mike's breath changed. When I found my father's lockbox, I found the loan agreement and the letter. I also found his bank records from the year of the loan. I placed the third document on the table, a printed summary Bernard had prepared from the original bank statements, each transaction highlighted. This shows the transfer. $35,000 in 2 installments from my father's personal account to yours. March and April, 15 years ago. I tapped the page once. It also shows that in the years between then and my father's death, your account transferred a total of $800 back to his. In 15 years. $800. The room was absolutely still. I watched Mike's face. The composure that had sustained him through 2 rounds of evidence, the measured voice, the reasonable man posture, the warmth that had always worked in every room he had ever been in, I watched it stop working. His jaw tightened. His eyes went somewhere to the left of the table, not at any person, just somewhere away from the center of the room, as though he was looking for a door that was not there. His hand, flat on the table now, pressed down against the surface. He laughed once. The sound had no warmth in it, a short exhale, almost involuntary, like his body was trying to locate the social mechanism that had always saved him and finding it offline. You don't, he stopped. Celestine made a sound. Not a word. She put her hand flat on the table beside her plate, and she blinked 3 times fast, and this time she was near crying, and she knew it, and she looked down. Solomon sat back in his chair slowly, the way a man sits back when he has arrived at a conclusion he did not expect to reach. Mike, he said, quietly, to no one's benefit but his own. Kwame looked at his father for a long moment. Then he looked at me, and what was in his face was not anger and not sympathy, it was something more uncomfortable than either. It was recognition. I want to be clear about one thing, I said. I was still calm. My hands were folded on the table. I am not here for an argument. I am not here to embarrass anyone. I am here because my father lent his brother $35,000, documented it carefully, and died before it was repaid. And for 2 years, I have sat at this family's tables and listened to that loan described as a gift. I have watched my father's words get replaced, one dinner at a time, with someone else's version of his intentions. I paused. He kept records because he believed that writing something down was how you showed a person respect. I am here because I respected him enough to do the same. Nobody spoke. Mike's hands had stopped pressing against the table. They rested there now, very still. He was looking at the documents in the center of the table the way a person looks at something they cannot change, calculating how long they have been wrong in front of witnesses. There was one more thing. I had saved it for exactly this moment. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, do it now. Because what happens next is the part Mike spent 15 years trying to prevent. You're going to want to be here for it. I reached into the folder a final time and placed a single sheet on the table. Bernard filed the formal repayment demand 6 days ago, I said. By certified mail, delivered to this address. The demand is for the original $35,000 plus 15 years of the interest specified in the loan agreement, which Bernard has calculated at a total of $51,400. I let that number arrive in the room before I continued. You have 30 days to respond. If there is no response, we proceed to civil court with this documentation, the loan agreement, the letter, the bank records, and the notarized notary stamp, and we let a judge determine what my father's paperwork meant. The sound Mike made was not a word. It started as an opening of his mouth, the intake of breath before speech, and then it stopped, incomplete, as though the sentence had dissolved before it formed. He sat back in his chair without seeming to mean to. His shoulders dropped. Not dramatically, just quietly, like something that had been held upright for a very long time had finally decided it was done holding. Celestine had her hand over her mouth. She was not looking at her husband. She was looking at the letter in my father's block letter handwriting, in the center of the table, and her eyes were moving across the lines of it slowly, and whatever she was reading was doing something to her face that I had never seen on it before. 31 years of marriage to a man, and she was reading a dead man's letter and learning something she had not known. Kwame's chair scraped back from the table. He stood up, not in anger, just stood, the way people stand when they need to be vertical, when the room has become too small for the thing that just happened in it. He put his hand on the back of his chair and looked at his father, and Mike did not look back at him. Priya, to my left, very slowly reached over and set her hand on my forearm. Not a dramatic gesture. Just her hand, warm, resting there for a moment. That was all. Solomon, across the table, picked up his water glass and drank from it and set it down, and in 40 years of friendship with Michael Osei, he had probably sat through 100 difficult moments and navigated them with loyalty and silence. But he was looking at the bank records summary now, and he was not saying anything, and the thing he wasn't saying was loud enough that the whole table could hear it. Adiz, who had no opinion on anything, was staring at the notarized letter with the expression of a woman who was updating a significant number of previously held beliefs. I want you to know, I said, and I looked at Mike directly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clearly, the way my father looked at things he needed to see plainly, that I would have resolved this privately. I gave 2 years for a private resolution to happen. This is what 2 years looks like when it doesn't. Mike opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. His voice, when it came, was quiet in a way I had never heard from him in my entire life. Your father would not have. My father wrote it down, I said. He told you exactly what he wanted. He wrote it in his own handwriting, he had it witnessed, and he kept it in a lockbox under his bed. My father did not leave things to interpretation. You knew that better than anyone. The room was completely still. Mike folded. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way something essential stops working. His hands went to his face, briefly, and then came back to the table, and he was 60 years old and sitting at his own dining room table, and the story he had been building for 15 years had just been taken apart in front of the people he had told it to, document by document, in his brother's handwriting. Celestine stood up from the table. She walked to the kitchen. She did not slam anything. The silence she left behind her was more complete than any door could have made it. The repayment agreement was signed 3 weeks later. Bernard had proposed a structured settlement, the full $51,400, paid in installments over 18 months, with the land parcel held as collateral to guarantee performance. Mike's attorney, whom he retained within 48 hours of the dinner, negotiated the interest calculation down by a marginal amount and accepted everything else. The first payment arrived on the 15th of the month following the signing. It arrived on time. I do not know what that cost Mike to do, and I have not spent energy imagining it. In the months after, the family geography shifted in the way it always does when a secret becomes common knowledge. Solomon called Mike less frequently. Priya mentioned this without editorializing, just as a fact. The birthday party guests who had watched Tommy hand over the card and had then heard, through the network of people who attended both events, how the dinner had resolved, those guests made their own quiet calculations. Mike still holds court. He still fills a room. But the room is smaller now, and the people in it know something they did not know before, and that knowledge does not go away. The jointly held land parcel was transferred fully into my name as part of the settlement terms, a provision Bernard had included and Mike's attorney had accepted without significant resistance, which told me something about how Mike's counsel had assessed the underlying strength of his position. The parcel is modest. I have not decided what to do with it yet. Some mornings I think I will sell it. Other mornings I think I will do nothing with it for a while and just let it be mine. Tommy is in 5th grade now. He plays on the school's football team, defender, which suits him, and he has his grandfather's eyes and his grandfather's habit of writing things down. He keeps a small notebook in his backpack where he records things he wants to remember, scores, jokes his friends tell him, observations he considers important. I found it once when I was looking for a pen, and I read one line before I put it back. Grandpa David said, "Always keep records." It was written neatly, in the careful print of a child who is paying attention. I keep the original loan document in the lockbox where I found it. I keep the letter there too. I do not take them out often, there is no reason to now, but sometimes, not frequently, I open the box and I look at my father's handwriting. The block letters he used for everything, from invoices to grocery lists to the most important thing he ever wanted me to know. I am not angry at Mike. I am not sure I ever was, exactly. What I felt was closer to the thing you feel when you watch someone decide that a story is more convenient than a fact, and you understand that the only answer to that is a better archive. My father kept records because he believed that writing something down was how you showed a person respect. I kept his records because I believed the same thing about him. That was enough. It turned out to be exactly enough. So, did I wait too long, or did I move at exactly the right moment? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe, there's more where this came from. If you want them early, uncut, before anyone else hears them, channel members are already ahead of you. The join button is right next to subscribe, below the video. I'll see you there.